All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about a concept known as diminishing marginal returns. Before we do that, though, let me take you on a quick blast from the past. In the mid 90s, a young Coach L was working at a store called Babies R Us. And Babies R Us has many products that they sell, ranging from diapers to car seats, strollers, furniture, baby clothes. They have an extensive supply of products that they bring to the market. And to bring those products to the market, you need workers. And I was one such worker. I remember times at Babies R Us where it just felt like there were too many workers at our store. And sometimes the managers would come around and they'd ask the proverbial, "What are you working on?" And sometimes it just felt like there were too many workers there for the work that needed to be completed. Occasionally, the managers would come in and say, "Hey, we're going to send some people home," and they would send a couple of us home. Or they may even scale back on hours. So I want to use this introduction as a way for us to understand that it is necessary to have adequate resources and adequate production in order to continually add positively to the business. Now let's take an example. We'll start off by looking at this table. You can see in this table we have total number of workers, total output for the business, and then production at the margin. So I'm going to use this little character here as a representation of labor at our business. When all of the resources are being used wisely, this worker can sell one car seat per day. Now we can see that our one worker here increased our total output by 1 and subsequently a marginal increase of 1. If we add another worker, now we have 2 workers, a total of 3 output, and an increase of 2 car seats in our production at the margin. We can follow the logic and say that with our third worker, output increases to 6. And again, looking at it marginally from 2 to 3, we have an increase in output from 3 to 6. Therefore, there's an increase of production at the margin of 3. Add another worker, we see our total output jump to 15 and 9 at the margin. Add another worker, we see our total output jump to 18. But interestingly, the rate at which we are increasing production at the margin has started to tail off. Up to this point, not only was our total output increasing, but our marginal output was increasing. So at worker 5, our marginal output is starting to reduce. Not turn negative, but is starting to reduce. In other words, investment in this worker is not as great a gain, marginally speaking, as the workers before him were. Let's continue on and add another worker, and we can see that our output jumps to 19. But again, at the margin here, we can see that our numbers are starting to diminish. Add yet another worker, and now we are seeing a negative result in production, as now we have too many workers relative to the actual work there is to complete. With our last worker, we can see that total output reduces to 7, leaving us with a negative 8 return at the margin. Now, let's look at another example here. We have units of labor and total jackets produced and points on the graph A through I. So what can I take from this? Well, I can take that at some point my production is not going to increase by the same rate it once was, and consequently at some point there will be too many workers and my curve will actually start to return back where it came from. And this is the concept of diminishing marginal returns. So you can see from points A through D, whether I'm looking at my curve here or I'm looking at my table, after worker 3, with the hiring of worker 4, we're starting to see diminishing returns. So therefore the increased output is no longer exponential. So at worker 8, we're starting to see negative marginal returns, where this worker no longer increases output at the margin. Now, of course, there's another step to go here. We have to look at marginal costs and marginal revenues to determine which worker we actually need. But nonetheless, this gives us an introduction to what we refer to as diminishing marginal returns and negative returns.